True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. A standard murder mystery centers on discovering who committed the crime. Edgar Allan Poe bypasses that entirely. Here, the killer confesses in the opening paragraph. Instead of hiding his guilt, he desperately demands that we believe he is perfectly sane. There was no crime of passion here, no long-standing revenge plot, and certainly no desire to steal the old man's gold. The sole motivation for a gruesome murder was a physical feature. He hated the old man's pale blue film-covered eye. This introduces us to the classic literary device of the unreliable narrator. We are listening to a confession, but we cannot trust the person giving it. Our job as readers is to cross-examine his story and separate his warped perception from actual reality. Taking this narrator at his word guarantees you will miss the real story. We have to look at his evidence to determine if we are dealing with a calculating mastermind or a man undergoing a massive psychological collapse. The narrator offers one primary piece of evidence to prove his sanity, his flawless planning. He wants us to marvel at how he spent 7 consecutive nights meticulously stalking the old man. Poe uses dramatic irony to build tension. The terror doesn't come from a sudden jump scare. It builds because we, the audience, know a deadly threat is lingering in the room, while the victim sleeps completely unaware. Looking at the vocabulary box on this page, notice how the narrator praises his own sagacity, a word meaning good judgment or wisdom. Yet his actions are completely absurd. He spends hours every night for a full week just to inch a door open and shine a single tiny ray of light onto a closed eye. That obsessive control shatters on the 8th night. The old man wakes up, the eye is open, and the ray of light finally hits its target. And the narrator's fragile restraint instantly evaporates. His hyperfixation on the mechanical perfection of the break-in is a classic delusion. He focuses entirely on how he commits the crime to avoid facing the irrationality of why he is doing it. He explains his anxiety by claiming a disease improved his body. Reading the text, he insists his senses are sharpened, specifically his hearing acute. He points to his deliberate tone as proof, asking, how then am I mad if he can tell the story clearly? But watch what happens as the tension peaks. The horror shifts entirely from the visual sight of the eye to microscopic auditory details. He becomes obsessed with the sound of beetles in the walls and the low groan of his victim. The final catalyst for the murder has nothing to do with sight. It is driven by the hallucinated sound of the old man's heartbeat, which he describes as beating like a drum, stimulating a soldier into courage. This acute hearing is the exact mechanism of his break from reality. His own severe nervous exhaustion manufactures the very sounds that command him to attack. When the police investigate a neighbor's noise complaint, the room looks perfectly normal. The narrator sits down, utterly convinced he has executed an undetectable crime. Then the auditory hallucinations return. Underneath the polite chatter of the officers, a low, dull, quick sound begins to echo in his ears. His guilt forces a severe psychological projection. He becomes deeply paranoid, convinced the police can hear this deafening heartbeat too, and are simply smiling to mock his terror. The noise builds until it's unbearable. His facade crumbles into violent pacing, frantic gestures, and a shrieking confession to tear up the floorboards. The police didn't have to interrogate him. He left no physical evidence. He was entirely undone by the crushing weight of his own fractured psyche. Here is the rational truth of the climax. The police never heard a thing. The telltale heart thumping beneath the floorboards was the narrator's own accelerating pulse, driven by massive, unacknowledged guilt. This brings us to the critical reading question on the page. Do we believe the events happened the way he described them? The evidence shows we cannot. His perception of reality is irreparably broken. Before this story was published, horror literature relied heavily on external threats, ghosts, monsters, and decaying castles. Poe revolutionized the genre by moving the monster directly inside the human mind. The terror of this story endures because it bypasses the gruesome details of the murder. It leaves us with a much more chilling reality. No matter how carefully you plan, you can never outrun your own conscience.